Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today I'm taking my 2018 BMW R1200GS in for service. While it's in, I'm going to borrow a BMW R1250RT for a few days. I think the RT is probably the bike I should have bought instead of the GS. The next few days will allow me to compare the bikes properly to see whether I made a mistake buying the GS and if the RT will be my next bike. Stick around for the next 15-20 minutes or so to see what I think. Right, got the R1250RT, and the first thing that struck me is just the width of the thing. It's absolutely huge. The riding position, the bars are much closer than the GS. The foot pegs are a little bit further forward and a bit higher up, and so it's not uncomfortable. It definitely feels that your legs are definitely more of an acute angle at the knee, but it doesn't feel uncomfortable as such. Like I say, the bars are much closer. So far it feels, I mean, the ride quality is absolutely amazing. I'm enjoying this. It's a lovely bike to initially get on and ride. It feels so much lighter than mine. I think it's just because everything is just lower to the ground. It's a big heavy beast though. Even on the flat it took a bit of a heave to get off the side stand. Suspension just wafts along, it just irons out all the little imperfections and bumps. Yeah, that gearbox is lovely. Even for me with my dodgy left foot. The mirrors work pretty well as well. It's a bit odd looking down to see the mirrors. Obviously the GS, the mirrors are up here somewhere. But weirdly, this actually feels like a smaller bike than it actually is. I mean, the thing that's always put me off with the RT is just how bulky they do look. I mean, you know, even without actually sitting on the thing from the front of the bike, that front end fairing just looks enormous. Seat height wise, I've got no idea whether it's on the high setting or low setting, but not a million miles off flat footing it on both sides. Let's try and third from bugger all revs. It's only 2,000 revs, pulls fine. I'm going to be careful up here because there is a speed camera. Let's try this screen a bit higher up. I wonder if you get that strange feeling of being blown forwards at a certain speed if you have the screen as high as it will go. I used to get that on the Pan-European. If you put the screen up to the maximum position, you get this weird backdraft, so it pushed your head forwards. I know you don't get it with this at all. Again, could be just the fact that I'm about 5'9"-ish. But either way, there's no buffeting. You can obviously get a bit of wind. I mean, that was one of the things I was not necessarily worried about, but I thought might be an issue, is the fact that the weather protection, the wind protection is too good. And what I didn't want was a bike where you literally don't get a breath of fresh air, whereas with this you can definitely feel the wind in your helmet in the vents, so it doesn't stop it completely. Needless to say, I'm impressed so far. It's a little bit quieter than my bike, doesn't pop and fart on the overrun, but I think this would have been an absolute weapon on the Scotland tour. If I was on a smaller bike I'd be right to the front of this queue, but I ain't doing it on this thing, especially given the fact that it's not my bike and I've got a nasty excess if I prang it. Right then, what's it like on the motorway? Well, the screen works really well. I apologise if it's a bit high and it's obscuring your view a little bit, but at least it's clear, so the view through it's not so bad. You get a little bit of wind around my shoulders, but it's not buffeting. It's quite smooth airflow. Absolutely nothing around my head and visor at all, like this with the screen at this height. If I drop it down a bit, you can really feel the wind now. So I think in warm weather you'd get loads of airflow through the helmet visors and across your shoulders as well. Let's say I'm only sort of 5'9"-ish, so if you're taller than me you'll get a lot more breeze. If I start increasing the screen, that's probably about where I'd have it. So that's just nice smooth airflow everywhere, just a little bit of breeze around my shoulders and arms, but barring that, a real comfortable place to be. And I've just had a bit of a play with the radar cruise control. I've got everything set at 76 miles an hour. Before any of you nannies saying that's speeding. Yes, it probably is an indicated speed above 70 mile an hour, but in real terms I'm probably doing 72, which I don't think there'd be any police officer that would pull me for doing that unless I was doing something really stupid and dangerous. But so at the moment it's just on standard cruise control, which I've had on the GS for, you know, obviously, and then the RS before that, and works perfectly well. If you put the radar cruise control on, it deactivates it for a start off, and then you have to reinstate it. And then you've got 3 settings, so you've got a short distance setting, which is the one it's currently on, I think. Yep. So I'll just show you, I'll try and get up behind this Fiesta and I'll show you how close it allows you to get before it slows down. So it's obviously picked up the car in front, which I think is why there's a solid green bar on the dash underneath the little icon of a car. So it's now, seems to slow down to about the speed of the Fiesta, so that's about as close as it's going to get, I think. Which is probably a bit too close for comfort for me. So it's speeding up. I've just gone round the wide and it's back up to the 76 that I've set. So I'll try and get behind this first and see if I can nip in there and just see how close the second setting gets you. I haven't really intended this to be a review, it's really just my thoughts in terms of a comparison between the GS that I own and the new 1250RT. So it's probably a bit of an unfair comparison because this thing is absolutely loaded to the gunnels with everything. So it's got the stereo, which I did have a bit of a play with and is unbelievable. Even at motorway speeds you can still hear it. In fact, I actually thought it was coming through that clear that I'd actually connected my headset to it. I hadn't, it was just the speakers were that good. So that's the distance it'll set if you go on the second setting, which again at motorway speeds is probably closer than I really want to be. Let's try the third setting. Okay, that's the third setting, so it's going to hold back a little bit. Probably about where I'd normally try and sit on the motorway, just give enough space to the car in front. A nice place to be is this bike. I'll tell you, I've got about an hour on the motorway now until I come off, so I'll let you know in a little while just to see how my comfort is going. The seat itself's really good, it's firm but not overly hard. You know, certainly not like the BMW F900XR, which the seat immediately feels like a plank on that thing. What else is it you might need to know? There seems to be a little bit of vibration through the bars compared to the GS. It seems to be racking up a huge amount of mileage on this thing. So the options really, considering I want something ideally with a shaft drive, I've got not that many options to choose from really. So there are the Motor Guzzies. I'm not particularly familiar with their range, but there is a adventure style bike in the Motor Guzzi range, which is a shaft drive. There's the Tiger 1200, which again is a shaft drive, but again the problem I've got with that is it's a tall bike and it's got a high centre of gravity. So not ideal for me, I'm too small, too lightly built for it. So yeah, I don't want anything even more top heavy and tall than the GS that I've currently got. So that really leaves me with the BMW R1250RS or the R1250RT. The RS is a little bit cheaper. I think list price on the BMW RS starts somewhere about 14,000. Obviously nobody ever buys a bog standard BMW, and I certainly wouldn't. I'd go for the higher spec bike with all the toys, which are nice to have. So I think I'd be looking at more like 17,000, or one of the £17,000, whatever that equates to in dollars and euros. like I say, this one, I think the RT, the 1250RT is probably somewhere about £20,000. So if I'm lucky, I might get about 10,000 for mine. So I'm looking somewhere between £7,000 and £10,000 to change. Whether I could justify that at the moment, I don't know. Probably not. I could probably justify it to myself. That'd be quite easy. It's just justifying it to she who must be obeyed, which might be a tougher gig. So as far as motorway goes, yeah, you could sit on one of these all day long from the feel of it, and it'd be absolutely great. Smooth, wind protection's great, comfort's good. Right, so the motorway test was a win for this bike. It's equally as comfortable, if not more comfortable, than the GS. So I've now come off onto a twistier road, so we'll see how that goes and see how that compares to my bike. So far it's coming out very well. Let's say the stomp of this engine is just unbelievable. Apologise to all the nannies out there who'll be moaning, saying I'm going too fast. So yeah, I think it's all looking very favourable for this. I don't want to go too far and say this is the bike for me, because I haven't tested anything else yet. Handling wise, it's a little bit, you have to push the bars a little bit more. I think two things there: it's a little bit heavier, but I think the main thing is that the bars are a little bit narrower, so you haven't got quite as much leverage on them. The engine and gearbox is just absolutely phenomenal on this thing. Don't even need to change down at that. So under 50 mile an hour in fourth, 3000 revs just pulls. It's got so much more mid-range than my bike. It's definitely a little bit harder to muscle around corners than the GS. Let's say I think that's just down to the leverage of the bars on the GS, nothing else really, and probably something you just get used to. So it just requires that bit more of a nudge to drop into corners. It feels quicker than the GS, certainly the 1200. Like I say, I've not had a go on the 1250 GS. Yeah, this engine is an absolute belter. Definitely got some vibes coming through them to my fingers and hands though. A little bit vibier than certainly than my bike. Certainly handles better than a 270 kilo bike ought to do. Yeah, I mean the star of the show is that engine. I mean, I'm sure it's nothing like as exciting as one of the KTM 1290s or the Multistrada V4, but it's a cracking engine, and it's just one of those real world engines. You don't have to have it screaming. You can be really lazy with the gearbox. You know, third and fourth gear does pretty much everything you would need to do on the road. And again, deceptively quick bike at covering a lot of ground very quickly. And I think once you're used to it, I would say this thing is equally as agile as the GS. While I'm enjoying myself on this little twisty road, I'd just like to say thank you to anybody who has subscribed over the last 6 months. I feel like there's a bit of pressure on now. I've got about 270 subscribers, and my goal really is to try and get to the 500 by the end of the year, which would be fantastic if I can do it. Hopefully my content's getting a bit better every time I produce a video, and I'll keep producing something that is of some interest to you guys. But like I said, thanks to everybody who has subscribed so far. If you're enjoying the videos and want to see a bit more of what I get up to, please feel free to like and subscribe. it's a definite contender for replacement for the GS. Is it the bike for me? Not sure, jury's still out on that one. Handling wise, when it's in dynamic, it is about as good as the GS, I think. In the road mode, it just feels a little bit soft and feels like almost like there's a hinge in the middle of the bike. It just feels a little bit wallowy, a bit almost feels like the bike can't, you know, on twisty bumpy roads, it just loses that little bit of control and just feels that little bit wallowy, a bit like I say, a bit hinged in the middle, so it's just this disconnect between the front and the rear of the bike. But I've got a feeling that is simply the weight of the bike and road trying to give a comfortable ride. In dynamic it's pretty good, it doesn't feel jarring, it's not rough. But you know, I've ridden it in dynamic all the time I've had it. I did try it in road mode but didn't like it. So I think the GS really has the handling edge to this, but not by a huge degree. It's these sort of roads that the bike sort of ties itself in knots a little bit in road mode. So a little bit twisty, a bit bumpy. Definitely doesn't feel quite as agile as the GS, but I think that's probably a combination of a few things. It's narrower bars, a bit more weight on the bike. Possibly a 17-inch wheel gives it a little bit less flickability compared to the 19 on the GS. But again, that's something that you'd get used to. It's just an idiosyncrasy of the bike. It's not really a problem. Okay, so my final thoughts on the R1250RT. It is a fantastic bike, and if I bought it instead of the GS 2 years ago, I would probably love it. As a replacement for my GS, I'm not entirely convinced. I was really hoping to love the bike, but after riding it for a few days, it's left me a little bit cold and not burning with a desire to go out and buy one. Some really good points to the bike. The ride quality is really smooth and plush compared to the GS. The engine and gearbox are obviously much better. The wind protection and weather protection are obviously a lot better. Much quieter than the GS. There's a lot less road noise, and the general comfort and riding position is about at least as good as the GS. The downsides are the weight and price, and it's not quite as agile on smaller roads as the GS. So let's say it's really not completely convincing me that it's the bike to go for. Keep your eyes out for next video. I'll hopefully be test riding some more bikes very soon, and we'll get some videos out as soon as I can. See you soon, guys.